very pleased to have someone who works closely with the Federation for American Immigration Reform, Dale Wilcox, who is the executive director of the Immigration Reform Law Institute, a FAIR subsidiary that is specializing in the legal matters and particularly has been doing some very important work on issues related to the Deferred Action on Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program. And Dale, it's good to have you back. We haven't spoken in too long, and I'm very pleased to hear about your new report. But before we get into that, talk a little bit about DACA, just to sort of level set for our audience, and what this is, who engineered it,
Sure.
And its current status.
Sure. In 2012, President Obama issued a policy memorandum, or actually had his DHS secretary issue this memorandum that basically amnestied certain individuals who came to this country before the age of 16. For years,
Ostensibly.
Correct. Yeah. Well, that's one huge problem with this program was fraud.
Right. Another, as I recall, was that he had repeatedly said he couldn't do this prior to doing it. Wasn't that right?
You're absolutely correct. And in fact, Congress itself more than 20 times had rejected the so-called DREAM Act, which would have done the same thing. So Obama was pressured by the open borders crowd to just go ahead and do it. And he had said publicly, I can't do this. I'm not a king.
Yeah,
I don't have that power.
And then he became a king.
And then he became a king. And he issued this memorandum, incidentally, importantly, right before his bid for re-election. So
I'm sure that was purely coincidental.
Certainly just coincidental. But DACA essentially was an amnesty for illegal aliens. We're not talking about children of illegal aliens who were born in the United States. We're talking about foreign national citizens of another country. He essentially amnestied.
Ostensibly were children, but some of them turned out to be very old children indeed.
You're absolutely correct. In fact, there are reports of gray-haired men in high schools around the country alleging they were DACA eligible. So a lot of fraud in this program.
So the fraud is one piece of it. There is another that you have made the focus of a recent report at the Immigration Reform Law Institute. And I wanted to get the gist of that report about identity fraud. Talk about the problem writ large. I think all of us are aware that people have been stealing identities and winding up, having people say they're them and getting credit or getting mortgages or what have you. But how does it bear particularly on this DACA story?
Well, in 2012, within days of DACA being implemented, Obama ended a decades-long practice of the Social Security Administration sending out, or the IRS sending out what's called no-match letters to employers. What happens...
No, I'm sure, again, this is purely coincidental that within days of launching this new initiative, he says, don't fool with trying to match. So what is this no-match list, and how does that operate?
Well, what happens is when an employer files their employee's W-2 form, the name and social security numbers are matched up by the government. Well, in some cases, the name does not match the social security number. For decades, the government has sent a letter to the employer and the employee stating, there's a no match. We need to fix this. You need to clarify. Well, Obama stopped that practice right after DACA was implemented. The government said allegedly it was costing too much money. But we know that it was stopped because it was causing problems with implementing the DACA program. The DACA eligible recipients didn't want to step forward if they had received a no-match letter. A no-match letter potentially could subject them to a federal felony. It's a federal felony to acquire someone else's social security number. So in order to get them to come out of the shadows, we stopped this practice. And in fact, they even went further, and we know that this was all part of a scheme because on the DACA application, it said they had to list every social security number you've ever used. Well, that was scaring people away. So the Obama administration issued within days a clarification that no, only list those social security numbers that you were issued legitimately by the Social Security Administration. So we dug into how many cases of no match were there during the Obama administration after he implemented this policy. We found out there between 2012 and 2016, there were 39 million no matches. So we're talking about potentially 39 million illegal aliens out there using American citizen or legal permanent resident social security numbers to obtain employment. And
so this is a group that obviously would be larger than the DACA population.
Correct.
By far.
Oh, yes.
And presumably speaks to the number of illegal aliens in this country. I mean, assuming some of them were using multiple false social security numbers, but
True.
Still, this sounds like it's a lot more than 11 million, which is the number that we're endlessly told is in this country now illegally.
You're right. The irony here is under the DACA program, if someone was accepted into the DACA program, they got a social security number. So they got a legit number. However, ending the no match letter has assisted illegal immigration. Generally. So you have aliens, and in fact, we learned just within this last month, the illegal alien who allegedly killed Molly Tibbetts had stolen someone's identity and social security number to get a job.
Walk us through that a little bit, if you would, Dale. As I understood it, the employers professed that they were shocked to discover this fellow wasn't the person he claimed to be, only once he wound up being apprehended in connection with Molly Tibbetts' murder. Were they at fault, or were they victims of something along the lines of what you've just discussed, or were they covering their butts?
It's hard to say. I can't attribute any kind of bad motives to them. I don't know the particular facts. At first, they had stated that they had used the E-Verify program to vet this alien. That turned out to be untrue. And for those people who don't know, E-Verify is a simple online free government website employers can go to verify that their employees are work authorized. They did not do that. So it's not mandatory nationwide. We'd love it to be, and we'd love Congress to get off their butts and make it mandatory, because that would reduce the jobs magnet that is drawing in all the illegal immigration.
I've had people say on the program that as between the wall and E-Verify, E-Verify may be even more important than trying to stop the flow of migrants, simply because if you stop the magnet, that will probably reduce that number dramatically. Is that your view?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. If they have no prospect of a job, they're not going to come over.
And is your experience with the E-Verify system that it is sufficiently accurate that it would effectively turn off the magnet if that were an obligation on all employers?
Yes. The statistics I've seen bear that out. And in addition, there is a process. So if there was an error, say a name spelling error when you're inputting the information, you receive a non-confirmation notice. So DHS gives you an opportunity to correct that. So even if there was an error somewhere along the way, there is a process to get that ironed out.
Let me switch gears in our closing couple of minutes with you. And again, our guest is Dale Wilcox. He is with the Immigration Reform Law Institute of the Federation for American Immigration Reform. You have done some very important work in your institute in connection with an instrument of what I think of as political warfare against lots of us, notably FAIR, frankly, our Center for Security Policy, and many others, namely the Southern Poverty Law Center, exposing some of their practices that are, well, I think discrediting them as an organization, as a resource, let alone as an arbiter of who is a hate group or, who should be censored. Talk a little bit about your experiences with the SPLC.
Sure. Yes, we have had successes. In fact, it got us labeled as a result of those successes. Imagine that.
I'd like to say that's a coincidence, too.
My organization has existed since 1986, but all of a sudden, after we exposed them, we made the anti-immigrant group on their hate watch list. May I note that my wife is a legal immigrant from Brazil, of all places. So the SPLC has really been stepping over the line for a long time. But then they took it to the courts. and that was their mistake. My organization is mainly a legal, not-for-profit. We've been going around the country supporting the president and his policies and defending him in various lawsuits, but we file briefs quite often in the Board of Immigration Appeals, which is the highest court in the immigration system. We filed a brief a couple of years ago, in the SPLC and some other open border agitator groups filed a brief opposing us. Not opposing the facts of the case. The BIA had actually asked us our opinion, so we were giving our opinion. They filed a brief just to tell the board they should not solicit our opinion because we're a hate group.
Haters. Yeah.
And we weren't going to take it. So we filed a complaint with the disciplinary counsel over at the DOJ, and they looked into it, investigated it, and issued an opinion. And in the opinion, they said the SPLC's attorneys' tactics were unprofessional and have no place in a court of law.
Wow. Well, this is just one example of them having behaved in a manner that is, I think, discrediting, as I say, and certainly disreputable. Dale Wilcox, again, with the Immigration Reform Law Institute. He's its executive director. We appreciate your time and for being part of this important conversation at Hold Their Feet to the Fire.